right, so what I will do before we start here, and maybe this is a little different from what we usually do, because I mean we're usually very straightforward in the sense that we're always discussing things that entrepreneurs and startup people who are thinking of startups think straight away. Now this time we wanted to talk about something a little different. Do we have to be all present at the same place? You know, nowadays we have this issue. Of course, California is the place to be if you want to start a company. But then, you know, living in California afterwards is very expensive. And we brought 3 people from 3 different companies here at different stages in their lives, and also in different industries, because we understand that it may be much harder for a company that depends on labs, for example, to transfer somewhere else than it is maybe for a fintech or for a company that develops engineering projects or things like that. So we want to hear these guys here. We have Jessica Eting from Flourish. We have Henrique Tarasiuk and Walter Maclay, both Henrique from the biotech industry, Walter from a more engineering systems perspective. I just want, without messing up too much with this, I just want to very quickly present BPAP to you guys. These are the guys that we have here today. Henrique Tarasiuk, head of finance and staff from OneSkin, which is in biotech. Jessica Eting, co-founder of Flourish, which is a fintech. And Walt Maclay, president of Voler Systems. What we'll be discussing is virtualization of the startup enterprise, but don't get too concerned about what virtualization means. It means trying to do things online when it's possible, trying to think of different processes, trying to think of different products. Let's see what these guys have to tell us about what they're doing in their companies. Very quickly, BPAP. So our mission as a program at Berkeley is to foster entrepreneurship in the UC Berkeley postdoctoral and graduate community in order to move innovations from the laboratory to the marketplace. We have there some of our goals. Someone in our team built this nice scheme here the other day, and I thought it was very interesting. We foster entrepreneurial spirit in postdoc and graduate community. We try to translate innovations developed in the laboratory and taking it to the marketplace. We try to build entrepreneurship as an integral part of the UCB environment, and we try to build a community of entrepreneurs among UC Berkeley's postdocs and graduate students. This is the executive board for BPAP 2022-23. We're always recruiting people who are interested. So if anyone in the audience wants to work with us on preparing the seminars and panels and things like that, please get in touch with us. This is the first of our planned sessions for the spring of 2023. We'll have at least 2 or 3 more from now until May, June, and they will be announced by the same means that you have been able to know about this session today. Of course, we're always very thankful to the Vice Chancellor of Research at Berkeley. We are directly connected to the Visiting Scholars and Postdocs Association. So we also thank Yvette, who's our director. SkyDeck and Bakker Fellows are 2 programs that are very, that we do a lot of things together. So we thank them a lot for their support. Maybe without further ado, let's get into some of the things that we planned for today and ideas that we wanted to discuss with our 3 invited panelists here. The first thing that I wanted to ask you guys is with respect to your location. What made you decide to be where you are, and what do you think that the main reasons for being there that are in place? Maybe could we start maybe with you, Jessica? And I never understand why we say girls first, because we should be the brave and courageous ones to say, whoa. Not trying to be polite.
Yeah, so happy to share a little bit in terms of like where we are. And I think that's a funny thing to answer because we are born remote, so we are everywhere naturally. But I think in terms of physical locations, I and my co-founder are in California. Specifically, we were both in the Bay Area. We've now moved a little bit from the nexus of like Berkeley, San Francisco, where we started. And my co-founder is now in the North Bay, and I'm actually in the Sacramento area. But we met in California at the MBA program in Berkeley, and made a lot of sense for us to continue to be here. And so that idea of us being here was really around the proximity to Silicon Valley, right? Being able, even though I'm in Sacramento, still fairly close. and what that means in terms of the kind of relationships and networking we're able to do here. And then our team, most of our team is actually located physically in Brazil. So we are a financial technology company. We have a financial wellness and customer engagement platform for financial institutions. And our primary customers are in Latin America, with Brazil being one of our biggest markets that we're targeting. So it makes a lot of sense for us to have much of our team there, in the spirit of both wanting to be able to have people who are working for the product that understand both from the end users, but also be close to relationships with some of our target customers. And so then we have our engineering team and most of the rest of our team in Brazil. Because we're also focused on Latin America, we have a member of our sales team who is actually in Bolivia, and his concentration for the region that he is focused on selling to is the rest of Latin America outside of Brazil. So really, we think about the place that people are located from a piece of the relationships they can have together internally, relationships that they have with potential customers and our actual customers, and then also relationships that we want to build within our network and fundraising with the founders here in California. That made a lot of sense. So we kind of thought about it in that place, because for our product itself, there really isn't any physical location that we necessarily need to be in. So it's really about what does our physical location give us in terms of relationships that allows us to foster and build and strengthen.
Walt, can you give us a perspective of how it goes for an engineering company?
Yeah, so I chose the office to be in Sunnyvale because it's near my home. Now, it turns out that having a location is important, even if we're all remote, because people ask, where are you? And if we didn't have a location, that would be a problem. And the fact that we're a successful company in Silicon Valley actually has a cachet. You've got to be better than average to be successful in Silicon Valley. So that's why we're here.
It's interesting that it seems that being in California is still an important thing somehow, right?
Yes, and our customers are mainly on the West Coast and in California. So, we're local. Now, I can remember when someone told me, well, you're in Sunnyvale and we're in San Francisco. We want somebody local. It's not that bad anymore. But, being in Sunnyvale and their customer in Boston or in Hong Kong, that they feel a little distant.
But still, you say that it's California and they know where that is. And
yes.
What I was going to say 30 years ago when I launched a startup here in Brazil, the important thing, well, at that stage, it was location. And location was being sometimes close to the customer, sometimes close to the raw materials if you're in the industry or something like that. But there was a second thing that was very important, to have a telephone line, right? Which nowadays only means we have to be connected, right? Henrique, I think you're the guy who has, well, your company is the one that is in a tougher position here, right? Because you're more, let's say, more deep tech in the sense that I understand that you probably depend more on labs and things like that. How is it for one scheme in terms of where it is located in?
Actually, because we do electronics and software, it's not a problem. We were remote before the pandemic. If you're writing code, some of it is done collaboratively, but you can do it remotely. And engineers don't have a strong need to be together. If you're designing electronics and doing a schematic, you don't have to be together. You can do that remotely. Now, in mechanical engineers, and especially with industrial engineers they collaborate more, they struggle more to do it remotely.
And Henrique, what about one scheme? No.
Okay, sorry for that. So what I was saying is that on the first years of the company, because we are so research forward, we are based on research. All the 4 co-founders of the company, they are PhDs. They moved actually to the Bay Area because of an acceleration program that was happening here. So it was kind of like chicken and egg, I would say, the choice of being in the Bay Area, because it was where the program was, but at the same time it was where we could find more talent in the biotech space. This were the first years of the company. So when everything was only research. So when the only people that we needed in the company were researchers, scientists. So those were the years where we needed to be in the Bay Area. We needed to be in the physical space. We needed to be in the lab. Last year, we launched a product. And then it was a completely different story, because then when we had a product out, then they were not only lab anymore. Then we needed to have the lab, people to still doing the research, but we also needed to have people on the marketing side, people on operations, people on any other type of function in the company. Those other functions, they're basically all spread out the US. So those other positions in the company, we have people in New York, we have people in North Carolina, in Seattle, basically all over the place, like including actually like myself. I'm currently living in the Bay Area, but I'm moving to Austin tomorrow. So I'm a really good example of like where we're based and what we're doing. So yes, there's some challenges. There are some challenges on being a biotech, on working remote, but I think it's just for a few positions inside of the company, not for all of them.
Right. Incumbent companies have been talking about digital transformation for a while. I'd say 20 years at least, right? And they have to transform. This digital transformation is because, of course, when they were born to be very physical. I mean, your organizations are growing, are growing in a moment where maybe digital transformation is not necessarily what you have to do, because you can, instead of transform, you can build something from scratch, right, in a different way. And I would like to know if you consider in your, maybe this is, of course, this relates even to finance and everything. If you consider, of course, being in California is great for these opportunities of accelerating, and we have all these funds that are looking for companies to invest and everything. But at least at the same time, we are in a moment where, well, interest rates are going up. And I understand that probably some of the money that was there to be spent on startups and hoping that that would produce more money, now some of those investors are going to say, I'll lend that to the government because it's less risky or something. Does that affect your planning for the future? Is this economical shift in the world through which we have been going through, at least since the pandemics? I don't know who wants to start with that. And this is a question that I had not thought of before. So I'll ask one of the boys to be gentle with Jessica. Let's start with one of the boys.
I'd be happy to answer because I've thought about this a lot. You know, there are big companies laying people off. People are worried about the economy. We're planning for growth this year. And to some extent, there are opportunities because a big company that's laid people off may still have projects and they can't hire people, but they have money that can be spent as long as it's not long term. We've got a company that approached us. They've got multiple urgent projects and they can't hire the people. They need us badly. They're already talking about 2 different projects. So there may be a downturn, but not everybody's affected.
All right. So what you say is that this may even be an opportunity for smaller enterprises to get more contracts with big companies.
In consulting, things can be better when there's a change, whether it's up or down.
All right. Maybe some. I know that, for example, Flourish is in a much earlier stage of its life. How is this affecting you in your growing planning, Jessica? The fact that some of the investors are changing their mood with respect to spending their money on new businesses.
Yeah, we went through fundraising this year, or I guess it was last year, and it was challenging. We had started to explore at the beginning of the year. We assumed, right, this timeline that we were going to execute it on, and then things changed and funding dried up a bit, and it ended up taking us a lot more time in order to fundraise what we wanted, and we had to readjust our expectations in terms of how much we might raise and really think about what that means for the planning of our business, right? Because we had an initial intention of raising more, and then we reevaluated and thought, well, what was this going to look like? But yeah, we had to rethink a little bit in terms of the way that we were going to approach. I think we were able to be successful in raising, right, in terms of like once we readjusted what we wanted to raise, we were able to be successful in raising that amount. But it definitely had an impact on us and what our planning is. I think we're going to have to think about the time period now that we're going to raise again, and really it's about tightening up the bootstraps here and thinking about more even closer around like how do we work towards like bringing in even more revenue and the way that we're going to plan our growth. Right, we're still growing as a company, but it's not the same plan that it would have been if we were still in the same environment, right? Because we don't have that amount of funds that we brought in initially. But I think it's been still very exciting that we were able to be successful, and it says a lot for us. And I think in that sense too, it's really in terms of when you think about the situation of a lot of companies that weren't able to raise and that had to shut down because of what happened, right? I think it helps us sort of then focus in on, okay, we were able to raise, and now this is the story that we're going after, right, in order to have success. So there's almost a benefit in this like ability to pivot your plans and to really be able to then refocus. And the fact that we're still moving forward, I think, is it has been like a good challenge to have been able to overcome, even though it took longer. And I think it also helped us think about how we fundraise and who we're fundraising for. So earlier in location, I said how it was beneficial for us to be in Silicon Valley Park and some of the relationships we're able to have with investors. And but we've also been able to have a lot more diversity in terms of who we brought in for fundraising. And we brought in investors that are also focused in Latin America, based in Latin America. And then also we were able to really think a little bit more broadly too, in terms of, because we have an impact focus as well in our company. And then who are we going to bring in that also has an impact lens? So in the end, like the creativity that it had us bring in and thinking about who we were targeting, who we were bringing in, I think even opened us up more and got us to be successful in one of the other things we wanted to do, of having a diversity of investors coming in. So there's like the kind of the difficult forces you are coming up against, and then how that gets you to actually be successful in other ways and to maybe achieve something in a much more strong way than you initially would have probably done if you weren't put up against that kind of challenge that you were facing. So there's always good things that can come out of being able to tackle that difficult situation that was thrown in front of you that you weren't expecting.
All right, and Henrique, what about you guys? How did OneSkin handle this change in the mood of the, let's say, the financial market? Mainly considering that you're the finance person at OneSkin at the moment.
Yeah, so there I was like in short, like very similar to Jessica. So we were fundraising last year, and it was like at the beginning it was tough for us to fundraise, especially because a couple of venture capital funds they were not very open to discuss terms, like not very open to talk to new companies that were not in their portfolio. So for the check that we were looking for the type of investor that we were looking, it was definitely not as easy as it would be a few years ago. But one thing that after we were able to close the fundraising that we were doing, I think we were one of the fortunate ones to cross that path. And on top of that, I think that we have one thing that really helped us in this way, that usually, I mean, the way we put our technology, we put our peptide, we put our science through the market, is like that we deliver the science is through skincare. And usually skincare is one of the areas that is not that affected when crisis comes. So it's actually like good for us in some way that people are not buying cars anymore. They are like, they need to spend their money in something else that is still feels like luxury for them, but it's not that expensive. So for us, we actually saw somehow like a drive in growth because of the start of the recession. So from a growth perspective, it was really good. From a fundraising perspective, it was definitely challenging. And I would say that, like, in addition to that, one really interesting thing that not only us, but like a few other founders and a few other finance guys in startups saw is a change in what you focused. We definitely were talking about like, how do we focus on growing revenue? How do we focus on growing number of customers? Now everyone is talking about not only revenue, but it beats that profit margins, gross margins. Like, so the margins, they all started to appear a lot more in all conversations now.
All right. Naresh has his hands up. Naresh, I mean, just jump in, please.
Yeah. Hey, Henrique, I just wanted to follow up the fundraising challenges, right? Like, I can understand why some of the investors might be like, not in favor of like this model. Were there any investors that you're able to flip that said no first and became yes? If so, what do you do? Or what did the ones that said yes look like? How were they different?
So I'd say like the ones that it was interesting actually, like in our path through this last fundraising, because at the beginning of the fundraising, when we started fundraising, like we did not had the peak in sales that we saw at one certain point of the company. So at that moment, a lot of new investors that we were trying to bring, that were like our top tier VCs that we were trying to bring, they were saying no to us, basically because of a lot of different reasons. Like, you're not that big, you don't have enough traction, you're not X, Y, Z. So all the all known excuses that we know, like we heard them all. When we started to get some traction after this peak in sales, things changed. And because we were always sending updates to all investors, like regardless if they said yes or wait or we're talking soon or no, we were sending updates with all of them. And then a few of the ones that said no before reached out back to us saying, you know what, let's reconsider this. and open again for discussion. I think the one critical point for us was to understand, because we were trying to reach out to investors that were focused on either in biotech and in DTC, e-commerce, basically like selling products. So we were trying to have like a combination of both. One critical point for us was to understand who we serve and what are they looking for. And this changed everything for us in the fundraising strategy.
What I was thinking here, and mainly hearing Jessica and Henrique, is that do you think that if some of these people in the audience were thinking about their own startups, and of course, if they haven't started their business yet, do you think that they will have to think of growing more organically than depending on external funding if they start their business during the next 5 years, let's say? What is your impression from what you've gone through?
I can jump in here. I would say 100% yes. I think every company that can bootstrap and that has the possibility to grow without external money, I would definitely go for that. In my opinion, I think like fundraising, it should always be just sort of like buying time. So you're buying the growth that you're gonna have in the future. So if you're basically raising money just for the sake of raising money, it doesn't make any sense. You're only going to be selling equity that is not worth it for. So it's only, in my opinion, like only if you have a plan to really like put the money into something that is going to work towards growth. And if that means if that means that you could not achieve the same growth without that money. If you can, don't fundraise.
Jessica?
Yeah, I think, I mean, definitely in agreement with what Henrique shared there. It's something that should be considered and thought about in general when you're fundraising. And I think sometimes when the money's flowing, you don't quite have that much of a sharp focus on it, right? But like that's really how it should be approached. And it's definitely in the environment that we're in now, the way that you need to think about it. Even like for us, some of our investors that invested in us again invested because have also been such good stewards of the funds that we had previously, and they had seen how we were, like they liked our really thoughtful approach in the way that we executed those funds. And I think, given the environment, given what it is, I think we want to see you really focused on what is absolutely necessary for the growth, and you need to be focused on revenue in ways that those expectations weren't set previously. And it's definitely going to continue. And I mean, right, and in some ways, with what Henrique said, it can make us better entrepreneurs, and really make us better at growing our business if we're focused in that way. So I think it should be expected from for at least the immediate future.
Okay, thank you.
For companies in the revenue generation phase, I think it's slightly easier for a meeting with an investor. But I think I just want to go back to Walt on your previous question, Alex. Like a number of companies want everything local, right? Like, can you talk about customers which are remote who are working with you, and what worked? And you've been in the industry for a long time. Now, was it a change in their behavior, and how does it look like? Give us a history lesson.
So things have been slowly changing to make remote easier. I gave you the example of many years ago, San Francisco and Sunnyvale are remote. Well, you would laugh at that today. But at that time, we didn't have Zoom. So it's become so much easier. We've gone from a point where you either met in person or telephone, there was no other choice, to where it's unusual to use the telephone today. And I do Zoom meetings all day. And we have customers who we never meet in person. We close the business and we do the work, and we never meet them in person. Now, if you've got a large customer, in our business, you have to develop trust before they're going to give you an order. And the best way to develop trust is to meet people in person and develop a relationship. So that is still important for some projects.
Trust is so key. I think you bring up a big point. I think that is the whole, there's a center, the core of building a remote. Maybe you have some stories of like how that trust is built or how trust is lost. Maybe you can give the two shades also, if you have a specific story of working with a product.
We had one customer, they were based in Texas, and we started working with them. We hadn't visited them. And there were some issues, sometimes there are technical issues, sometimes there are communication issues. We met together when the CEO was at a trade show in Las Vegas. And after that meeting, they understood us much better. the communication was easier. Things went smoothly for a long time after that. It made a big difference. And it's always better if you can head that off earlier. So if we had met them in person before there were any issues, it probably would have been better. Though sometimes how you respond to issues is more important than other things that you do. Let's see, that's what was the other angle that you were looking for, the other side of that?
How trust is broken because things are...
Yeah. So, well, recently we've had a customer, a large company, where they don't listen to us. They don't trust us. It's just the way this guy operates. We basically had to fire the customer. We can't work with them. You know, if you can't be trusted, what did they hire us for if they don't believe anything we say?
So it's interesting when you say fire the customer, fire the customer. When you talk about trust, we always think of the customer trusting the company. Now, of course, the supplier also has to trust the customer, and there's also trust within the company. And in that sense, again, as I said, there's no coincidence between my surname and the surname of another girl that is in this meeting here, who works for Flourish. And I know from hearing my daughter talk about is that Flourish has been doing a lot to build trust among its its own people, you know, because leaving each one of them in a different country sometimes makes possibly that very challenging. Maybe Jessica, could you say anything about that, and how you make sure that the employees of the firm trust the firm and you trust them, considering that you're not looking one another face to face?
Yeah, that's exactly what was going through my head as you were talking here, because so much of the trust building that we are thinking about is between us as all of the members of the team. Right. And I actually personally had not met most of the team in person until this year, or last year, the middle of last year, really, because I had not had the opportunity to travel because of COVID, and I had small kids. I was being very careful. And so I didn't get to meet everybody in person, face to face. And as much as I think, because we're born remote, it's very much a part of our DNA as a company, there is still a lot to be said for in-person, just as Walt said. There's a level of connection and trust that happens when you get to sit face-to-face with somebody. And I think there are also certain, there's so many different personality types that you're working with. And so there's some people that are very open naturally, and it's easy to kind of make those connections with those people over Zoom or whatever. And when you're in person, it gets stronger, but it was already there. And then there are people that are a little bit more closed as individuals, right? It takes a little bit more in order to create that relationship. And because of the opportunity to meet in person, I found that conversations have opened up much more. There's a much more of a feeling that they can actually show who their true self is because they've met and they can finally have an understanding of who you are. And so even personally, I've seen changes in relationships that I have with team members because I was able to have that in-person conversation with them, whereas I wasn't able to have before. And it goes a little bit to the idea of where I said, and when we have people in different locations, trying to have at least a couple of little hubs of people that are close together. So there is the occasional time for them to get together in person, maybe a little more often. And then those of us who live further away from each other can at least see each other in person once in a while. And I think Yasmin, maybe, I don't know if she wants to chime in on any stories here, but right, with her having lived in Brazil, she had that closeness to some people, but still there were others she hadn't met. And now as a digital nomad living in other areas, right, she's living a little further away. And so I know that there's some relationships that she was able to really strengthen when she was able to meet some of the people on the team in person versus the connection that they had before they actually had that time to sit down together in the same room.
Jessica, do you have any frameworks that you use just around the concept of trust? Others can follow up as well, but I think, I don't know if some frameworks work better than the other. What worked for you guys, if you have one?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got a specific framework to necessarily share. I mean, one of the things that we have, we've been really talking and discussing about recently is around what is necessary to build the psychological safety within a company, and what are these what is actually necessary for people to then have that sort of comfort. And I think one of the things that we've been trying to really implement is an openness for feedback and understanding of what's happening between people, and what you see in terms of whether or not we've had what has been seen in terms of successes and failures and what individuals are having. And so we've been really trying to create this environment where it's okay to be vulnerable and open with something that has gone wrong, something that has failed, what the learnings are that you've got through. And the more we can talk about that, the more that it allows for that safety of anything that you can bring forward. So it's been one of the things that we've been trying to sort of bring up this conversation within the organization and create some structure that allows for more of that internal sharing. And then I think the other piece to it of like really creating some more of that trust between individuals has been a clarity of like their own responsibilities and spaces, because I think like there has been tension sometimes when individuals in the organization are not quite sure where is their space, where is their line, and when we're not sitting next to each other every day and not having those conversations, sometimes things can get a little bit blurry and you're not getting visibility specifically into what somebody might be working on, and you don't have that time to go chat at the water cooler and discuss what has been going on. And so whereas we're able to make more clarity along those lines and then have more openness in terms of what achievements are happening and where some failures are happening, it's creating that sort of openness and connection to people and allowing for that to happen. So I think there's just different ways in terms of how we're trying to build this into the culture in the way that we're able to open and have conversations with each other. And then the ways that we can think about in terms of the in-person piece of it and the way that we can allow that for building that connection and trust in person, right? We're going to some expectations around being able to have people get together, a larger company getting together at least once a year, people who live in the same regions being able to get together, right, at least once a month, if not more, and kind of think about what are some of these in-person cadences at a minimum we need to have in order to strengthen that interpersonal relationship and building up that face-to-face structure.
Cool. Thank you. Henrique and Walt, do you want to chime in on those frameworks if you have any?
I was going to say that we're probably using the same playbook as Jessica. So most of the things that she shared, we are also trying to implement some a little bit easier to implement, others a little bit more on the challenging side. It was like a few things that came to my mind while she was talking is that like it's like a couple of things like they're easy said than done. We try to do. We're trying actually like to hire more people now, and it's very tough for us to identify the individuals like and identify a little bit more the behaviors that they're going to have interviewing remotely. So I think like those face-to-face interactions they play a really good role on this. So I was going to say that like we are still a very young company, learning a lot. So we do try to implement a couple of frameworks, but in our case, it has been a lot of trials and errors in this environment to try to create culture and cultivate what we have, what we're doing well in the company, and it has been an interesting journey so far to navigate this.
But Henrique, still when you say that it's a lot of trial and error, it's a trial and error in building a company from scratch, let's say, in the sense, and already with these possibilities that large incumbent companies struggle to deal with the need to transform into something different than what they were in the past. One thing that I heard from Yasmin when she was still here in Brazil was about a little token or something that everyone in the company had that was a way of sort of trying to make the team connect to one another. I never understood very well that when my daughter explained it to me, but maybe you could try and explain how you used that little token to try and make people connect and trust each other.
Oh my gosh, you were reading my mind. I was going to say, I think Yasmin might have a good story about how you can use little emblems and little tokens of like that represent the company of how it connects people. Because I think that she did a really good job in introducing that.
I think, so when I joined Flourish, one of the first missions Jessica gave me was something related to onboarding and getting people together on a remote environment. And I had no idea how to do that because I was just out of university. I had this big challenge. I was talking to some mentors we had on investors and stuff like that, but most of them were speaking in-person company language that didn't quite translate to what we wanted to do. And I think the only really big previous work experience I had was my intern at Disney World, which was great because they are known for having interactions between people and have a big employee branding. So I sat with my Disney onboarding guide and all the books my dad bought me when I went to work at Disney, because it's like, if you're gonna work for Disney, you might as well read all this. And I thought about how to do an onboarding that was as cool as Mickey, as the Disney one without Mickey. And I was like, I want a character. And then Pedro, who is Jessica's co-founder of Mexico, and he bought everyone like little Mexican pigs and sent around. So I started a channel on Slack called Where's Flowing, and send everyone an email with a storyline about that pig, why that pig was important, how that pig reunited us. So people could have a way of sharing their normal lives in an official way without detail. So over like last year, I think we had over like 100 of points doing that is our little pig, the name we gave it, doing things all over the world. And I think one thing that really works well for Flourish is the fact that the company culture allows you to tell what you're doing. Because I heard people on my traveling like, oh, my company have no idea that I am next country. And I think we've always been very open. And with that, we also have a big power of influencing others. And we shouldn't forget how predictable humans being are. So I would say like some people like to stay more at home and stuff like that. But those who are being digital nomads, we always end up in the same places. It's really funny. So the moment you post a photo with the pig somewhere, one of those people from Flourish who's traveling around are going to message you and saying like, I was there like a month ago, where I'm going next month or next year. And that has been like really cool conversations started. It's not only on a traveling level, but also like on food, you know, posting what you're eating with the little pig, kind of starting like a storyline around that. So I think that was one of my first projects, I think, at Flourish, and one of the ones I'm definitely more proud of it, and how people really got the big story, and how much conversation started by creating this one thing that united all of us. That was something as simple as having a pig figure.
Well, it seems that anyway, keeping people together and keeping people motivated and having common goals and everything is one of the huge challenges we have when we are apart, right? So our next question here, and this was when we were exchanging emails during the previous week here preparing for this. This was something that Walt reminded me of. Who do you think that can work and who cannot work remotely in a startup? Are there jobs that need to be done physically at the office, or what do you think?
Shall I start out?
Sure. Yeah. See, he prepared a question for himself.
Yeah.
Go on.
So well, in our field, when you get to manufacturing, pretty much has to be done where the equipment is. You don't have that equipment at home. So there's a job that can't be done remotely. But
you mean machinery, machining pieces of...
Yes, or assembling circuit boards.
Okay.
It all requires equipment, so it's done on site. But we've got salespeople who are remote, marketing, accounting, engineering. We're lucky we're in a field where, or in a business where pretty much everything can be remote.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, at the beginning of the pandemic, I moved to Montana, so I'm remote.
Mm-hmm. You're in Montana right now?
I'm in California right now, but I live in Montana officially most of the time.
Right. Okay. Henrique, what about one scheme?
Yeah, I was going to say that it's very similar on one scheme. So everyone that has some relationship with the formulation of the products that needs to be in the lab doing research, it's basically a job that you cannot do from anywhere else inside of the lab. So you need to be there. You need to be like physically there on a day-to-day testing, going to the lab, going to the bench. Everything else, it has been like working well for us to have people all around. And I would say like there is even advantages on having people all around, like especially I would say like on customer service. So we have people that are based on the East Coast and people that are based on the West Coast. And because of this difference in time zone, they can cover a broader time when they're talking to customers. So we face almost the same challenges as Walt.
Mm-hmm. Do you face any challenge like that, Jessica? Or maybe not in software development?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one specific role that really needs to be right in a particular location. And I think anyone could kind of pick up like Yasmin is doing and go anywhere. But it does pose challenges around time zones. And I think Yasmin sometimes has to get up at 5 in the morning and start working, or 4 in the morning and start working. I sometimes have to get up at 5 in the morning and start working. So as much as we don't have any particular roles that have to be any one place, when we have to have people everywhere, it does pose some challenges just in terms of like time zones. So as much as Mika said, you can get some benefits from it, there's also some difficulties there when you're trying to get people to work together at the same time. But we ourselves have gotten a lot of questions, like especially my co-founder and I, when we were fundraising in this last round, of are you going to relocate to Latin America? Like if your primary customers are there, like you probably need to be on the ground. And we don't have plans to move to Latin America. This is where our lives are, and we have other people in our lives that would be very upset if we moved to Latin America. But right, I think the thing is that we can balance that. We can travel. I just spent 3 months in Mexico, 3 weeks in Mexico. Like we can have our times when we are located in a specific place for whatever relationship building, right, that we're needing to do, face-to-face time that we're needing to do. And we can do that for a short period of time throughout the year, but still be located primarily in our place in our home where we decided is really the right place for us to be building for our own lives. So I think we're lucky in that way where sometimes we do have to be somewhere, but there's no place that we have to be the entire time where we would actually have to locate ourselves there.
I remember that I once heard from a director from this very big IT company in India that their strategy was, in terms of time zones, was follow the sun. And they always wanted to be, I don't know how many hours ahead ahead or after their customers, because that made them more efficient in the sense that I think it was after the customers, because the customers at the end of the day wanted to get rid of their problems. They gave them a call or something, and then they had their whole day to work on, because the customer went home to sleep and wouldn't bother them. And so there may be, it's challenging, but it may also be to one's advantage. Yeah, some 20 something years ago, when I decided to, as I told you at the beginning, I was also an entrepreneur at the beginning of my life, and then I became an academic. When I got into academia, I still thought of the things that we wanted to do in business, and one of the things we were thinking even back then was all the possibilities of virtualization. Of course, beam me up, Scott, has not happened yet. We can't move from here to somewhere else in the world in a fraction of a second. We cannot even move physical products around quickly, but there are things that we can do to our processes and to even to our products to make them more virtual. I wonder if you think of ways in which, although it's impossible to do the beam me up, Scott thing, ways in which you plan your products so that it becomes easier to skip these challenges of not having to be physically at one specific place. Is there any, is this things that you think about when you're thinking of your, of course, again, software seems to be something that you don't have to think too much about that, right? It's available anywhere. You press a button here and it's available somewhere else. But for the more, maybe this is a question more for the more physical stuff that Walt, their project, but it's still projects, but they have to turn into products, right? And to the products that Henrique's company delivered.
Well, we didn't set out to have a virtual company. It started by having really good people who decided to move. We had our accountant decide to move to Maryland. She was working in our office. And when you got a good person, you want to keep them. So we figured out, okay, what is it going to take? Can we do this? And we discovered we could. And then we had an engineer who was working with he's trying to get a green card. He didn't get it. He's back in India. We're still using him many years later because he's good. So, it's really the people and keeping the people and having people work well. That's what drove things the way they are, not a master plan to be virtual.
The master plan is to be effective. And yes, that involves maybe being virtual, considering that now we have some tools that allow us to.
Yeah, and now when it's hard to hire in Silicon Valley, we can hire outside of Silicon Valley and have them work here.
Yeah, I was going to say that from the hiring piece of it, like we also think like where is the talent and where can we find it, and not like if the person that is like the right fit for the company is anywhere else, like it's fine for us as long as it doesn't harm in any way like the job to be done. But in terms of product itself, while you're asking, I was trying to think here if we are doing something to make the product a little bit easier, and it's tough in some ways to make the physical product more virtualized in a way that you can produce anywhere. But I think like the one thing that we are doing well is trying to develop all the processes to come up with the product so it can be copied and pasted if you go somewhere else. So we were discussing about internationalization, and maybe when we do that, we're not going to be producing in the US and then shipping somewhere else. So for us to do that, we need to basically put everything inside of a box called processes and then ship the process somewhere else to do the same thing. And we have the same level of quality, and we have the same standards that we have so far in the US. And that is a way for us to internationally to virtualize the product.
So it is, you have been discussing that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I was starting to think like if that would classify as that, but I guess so.
You know, one thing that I always thought that, I mean, when we can virtualize, for example, the information flow, for example, Flourish these days, I mean, I can buy flowers here to be delivered to, I don't know, to Jessica in California. I'm sure I can do that, right? So this is it's not the flower that was dematerialized here and rematerialized there. It's but we just changed the process, and the fact is that she gets the flowers there the same way as you know, if it had been dematerialized here. And so the Beam Me Up Scott thing may work somehow if we think of a process that allows for that, at least for the customer, from the customer's perspective. So this is this, and it seems, Henrique, that you're already thinking of ways of dealing with that somehow, you know. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I don't know if anyone from the audience has any questions. We don't want to monopolize our. And Naresh, it seems that it doesn't seem that it's midnight here in Brazil. It seems that it's midnight there for you.
You have a 3-month-old? Yes.
When you have two small kids,
yes,
7 o'clock in the evening is like midnight, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, mine are waiting right now for like when I'm going to put them to bed after the event.
Yes. Well, if you're waiting for others to ask questions, like, you know, if you had a wish list of one thing that will make your life easier in the virtual world, you all can talk about it.
Well, I can definitely start on that because we were just discussing this at one meeting that I was. So I think having one source of truth for all the tasks, everything that needs to be done, every activity, every process, so people can follow what is going on, what are the things that should be done in roadmaps or any framework that you want to use, but like one source of truth. Like we were using Asana as an example to do task management. If you have that in place and it's working properly, people can start working at any time, can log off at any time, and they're going to know what to do and when to do. So that is key for us when thinking about expanding the geography that we hire.
Walt?
You know, I guess since we didn't set out to be virtual, we just became virtual. I don't see that there's anything special about being virtual. And what we need are things like more customer relationships. You know, it's just because we're virtual, the needs are the same.
Yeah. Well, I want to pick your brain because you have been in the industry the longest in this space. I'll go back to the question of trust. What are the things you do to build trust with customers or your clients?
Well, the one key thing is to do a good job of networking. Meet lots of people like you, Naresh, and you know, you meet lots of people, you develop relationships, and you know, the one thing I'm lucky about, people tell me, well, I can trust you. Well, I don't know what I did, but I talk to people and they say they can trust me. So that's very nice. But it's developing relationships, and some of those relationships go back many years.
And is it as easy to develop those relationships electronically as it is face-to-face?
Well, during the pandemic, there was no choice, so it didn't make any difference. But yeah, face-to-face is easier. So, and sometimes it's very important. So, you know, not everything can be done remotely.
But at the same time, you're saying if face-to-face it's important and easier, maybe face-to-face is something that can be done by someone that is physically located close to the customer, not necessarily you know, the engineer who's developing the project anywhere in Montana, maybe.
Yeah, well, you know, Zoom is rather close to face-to-face. Mm-hmm. If you're comfortable using it, it's an everyday thing. It's getting pretty close. It's not the same, but for a lot of cases, it's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, do you have your wish list?
I think similar to that, Mika. Maybe yes, that like task list, but the if I had like the answer to how to make the sync async work really well in the virtual world, like I think like that's it. Like I think with what you were saying, Mika, was like how to make the async part work well, but that balance, right? And getting that right balance of being in this on the call at the same time versus when you don't need to be. And it's almost like the new thing around whether or not what the definition of remote is, because people come in with the concept of like remote having a level of async work, and everyone sort of has a different definition of what that might be. At least we're finding that. And so if like I could get the like golden key to unlock that right balance between sync and async, that would be beautiful for us.
Syncing and async, I mean, I think what Henrique mentioned and you mentioned is something around communication. You know, what are the challenges, or maybe like what are the tools that are really helping you with good communication? I think it goes to you with Walt to, like, you know, updating your clients, or, you know, what are the best practices in the communication spaces that you found helpful?
You're asking me?
Any of you, yes.
Well, when you're in marketing, you want to communicate with lots of people. So you need a database. You need a tool to keep track of everybody. And some communication is done by mass emails, and some is done by meeting people for lunch. You've got a whole wide range of types of communication, and you know, different ones work better in different situations.
How about the engineering? You know, once you take up a project, what is that communication? Or maybe you can also touch upon mistakes that happen by miscommunicating or not communicating enough.
So project management is critical. You can have really good engineers, and if it's not clear to everybody what's supposed to be done, if there's not communication on a regular basis, things go off the track. So having a weekly meeting with the customer and the engineer and a project manager is absolutely essential. And having clear requirements. If the customer doesn't tell us very clearly what they need, or maybe they can't and we help them, but there needs to be a set of requirements that says this is what we need in quite a bit of detail. You don't want the engineer to figure out what the customer wants, because, or you know, what our customer wants, for example. The customer knows that much better than our engineer.
Henrique, any good practices in communication that helped you guys?
Yeah, I was going to say that it was quite interesting the way we got to better communication. I would say, like, not gold standard yet, but like better communication. So when we started to grow the team, like everyone was trying to do their work and share with the broader audience to get feedback and to get some insights. So it was very interesting to see that at a certain part of the company, everyone was having more meetings than really like time to execute things, because everyone wanted to jump in a call to talk about things that they were doing, and sometimes like those jump in a call things lasted for like half an hour, 45 minutes. So at a certain point, like we realized, do we really need to be jumping in calls every single time?
I remember I had a boss once a few years ago that used to say, "Those who are not seen are not remembered."
Mm-hmm.
Is that a challenge for you with, I mean, having people working for you from different parts of the world, and maybe some of them are simply just quieter. They're doing their work, but you don't see them, you don't remember them. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. So I was going to say that, like, right after what we did, and kind of like really goes together with what you just asked, we realized that a tool called Loom, or anything like that, so where you can record yourself, you record your screen and record yourself, really worked well. Because then people started to, like, instead of asking for 35 or 30 or 45 minutes Zoom calls to discuss anything to ask for feedbacks, they were just like recording 5-minute Looms and send you, so you could check it out like when you have 5 minutes in your calendar, and then send feedbacks either on Loom or like on Slack. So that really helped us on being more efficient, and really helped what you just asked. So people that were sometimes like shy or like not wanting to expose themselves that much to say, hey, can I jump in a call with you to discuss this? They are more comfortable in recording their screen and say, hey, can you give me feedback on this thing that I'm working with? So that really increased our efficiency inside of the company.
I see that Jessica's not in there. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, it made me think of a couple of things. So when you said if you're not seen, you're not here, I mean, I think there's we like implemented this virtual office called Gather, and it's what it made me think of is kind of funny, but like we just have these little avatars, and all you see is this little like character and the person's name. But there's something about that makes it feel like I'm seeing people, even though like I'm not actually like even seeing their face. Like I'm just seeing their existence, and like it feels like we're working together. So there's something about like that connection that brings But in terms of like the communication, I think one of the tools that we have brought in that has helped a lot is Notion. So we brought and that has helped so much, and we've really like embraced it as our kind of knowledge management sharing tool. And we've also been able to give visibility into what people are working on through this tool. So it like started out small and we really expanded it. And it's a really great place for both like documentation and also for us to be able to give visibility into what people are working on and be able to track tasks. So I think that we've even used it to where we have little wikis for each area. People's faces are there so that you know like who is on that team. Important links of information that share what we're working on, what a product team might want to know from the marketing team. And so that's been huge for being able to both like document, communicate, and disseminate in a much more structured and organized fashion. So I think for us, like that has been a really big, important tool that we've adopted within probably the last year.
I remember that once Peter Drucker, or Peter Drucker, considering that he was from German, Austrian origins, said that the geography of the world had changed with the railways, because the railways made mankind feel that we had dominated distance. And then he lived to the beginning of the internet to say that internet had made mankind feel that we had that this distance didn't exist any longer. Right? Well, this was some 20 years ago. I wonder what he would say about the extent to which we took this feeling of distance not existing any longer. If he was here in this call, he would say, yes, I was right 20 years before. I knew that distance definitely doesn't exist. People can work with partners, customers that are in the other side of the world, and they're just one Zoom meeting, one Zoom screen away. They can have even their employees working in different parts of the world, and that all works in a seamless way. So it's interesting that we're going this way. I think this is the first time that BPAP has touched this topic, and sometimes I think that maybe into the people who are thinking of a startup are thinking much more. They're much more interested in ways of being funded and everything. But I think that they have to start thinking that the companies of the future are going to be very different from the companies from the past. So we thank you very much for giving us some food for thought here, some ideas of what you're doing, because whatever you're doing now, you're experimenting with what others will also have to do in the future. So I don't know if Naresh has anything else that he wants to say or no. So thank you very much for being with us today. We'll be editing this recording and we'll send it to you when it's ready. Well, it's, again, as everything that we do is with a lot of passion, but not that professional. So don't keep your expectations too high, kids. Thank you very much, guys. And hope to see you again in a future occasion. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.